Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we are going to discuss a film that we think might be underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about it. I'm Josh Hallam and I'm here as ever with Alice Oliver. Alice, how are you?
Very well, as always. Thank you, Josh. How about yourself?
I'm very well. We are joined today by another brilliant guest. He is a comedian, he's an actor, a writer, he is a legend of lockdown, and now a crime writer. Fergus Craig, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm amazing. I'm absolutely amazing. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for taking the time to come on. So we always start with a completely random question just to get things going. Alice, I'll come to you first.
Mm-hmm.
What is your pet peeve? You've probably got a few, I know, but what's one of them?
One of them, gosh, okay, golly, because that is a list as long as my arm. I'll be honest, but just one of them.
And you've got long arms.
Yeah, all 5'4" of me. I suppose one that does often come to mind is when people are horrifically rude to service staff or to retail staff, basically people who do jobs that uptight people think are beneath them, and therefore they get to speak to them in a certain way. Obviously, having worked in hospitality for many years, and I was a care worker actually for many years, so I've had a lot of people shouting at me for no good reason. So now I can really sympathise, and I just think there's no need. Like, if you're already out in a restaurant or a bar or something, you're already having a nice time, right? You're there to get drunk or have a nice meal. They're at work. Like, the least you can do is just be nice to him. But that's one anyway, and I'll leave it there because I could really go off on one. But what about you, Josh? What's yours?
Yes, similar. I think I just extend that to like anyone with bad manners in general. Like I'm quite overly polite, like to service staff. I will.
You are actually, even to me.
How much is this jumper? £20? £22? £25? I'll give you more. How much is this jumper? But no, I can't. Yeah, I people who are rude to service, people who are rude in general. Like I'm so overly polite. Like until fairly recently, I worked with a guy who I don't work with anymore, and I worked with him for 3 years. And he had it in his head that I was a huge fan of the TV show Frasier.
Okay.
But I've never watched it.
Oh.
Never. And so it got to the point where it started informing my life, and I was just like Googling stuff as he was mentioning it, going, yeah, Niles, and that
Are
episode.
you messing? Did you really do that? Because you couldn't say no.
I ended up just watching actual episodes of Frasier.
So funny. Oh, Josh. You funny thing.
I know. Pathetic, really, that.
Oh, no.
Just tell the truth. Just tell the truth.
Nice guy.
Fergus, what about you?
I operate just a sort of constant sort of low-level hum of annoyance, but like usually just at myself. It's hard to think of something specific. One of the choices I had, I want to sort of reverse ferret on it because it's service staff.
I just hate them. I hate them and their minimum wage.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are all terrible, actually.
And I tell you, I will say it actually, because I also worked in hospitality, right? What I don't like, and I guess what I'm blaming here is the management. Look at me, I'm going to do it. I've got the confidence here after somebody who works in hospitality, their biggest pet peeve is people being rude to people in hospitality. I'm just going to jump right in and complain about service staff. Can you believe I'm doing it?
You do it. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Is when you are say you're like at a football match or a music gig or something like that, the place where time is of the absolute essence. If you're queuing up for something, because of the way the system runs, the people doing that job are all doing it for the first time. So there's a queue of 10,000 people, and every single pint. It's, oh, you want a pint? Okay, I'll go and get a pint. Do you understand what I'm saying? I guess I'm not having a go at you, Alice. I'm having a go. I'm having a go at the structures that have allowed such a thing to take place.
No, I know what you mean though, because there is a flip side. Poor service is still irritating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm not. I don't kick off about it. I guess I just don't like faceless operations where Well, I'll give you another. Here, I'll just go. I'm just going to lay into service staff now.
Go ahead. I can take it.
But what I'm really laying into is Deliveroo. So I ordered a Deliveroo tonight, and it kept on telling me that they were on their way, and then they were there, and then it told me it had arrived, but it hadn't arrived.
Oh, heartbreaking.
But there was nothing I could do because I was using some great big faceless corporation. So I couldn't talk to a human being, and I had to go through their app. You know, it's not entertaining.
I'm so sorry for that happened to you.
It is heartbreaking when you're watching the little man or the little bicycle or the little car, and they sort of go past your address, and you're like, sort of want to go, no, back here, this way. Oh shit! And you get it, and it's all cold.
Yeah,
and you're like,
or spilled, and there's grease falling everywhere. Or if you get a milkshake, and then suddenly the milkshake is all over everything. I get what you mean about like at the gig or at the football match, though, because obviously if you miss a goal, that's pretty much the whole night ruined, isn't it? And it's like, oh, but I needed a beer.
Well, I went to the Olympics, and there were 2 football matches on. You paid for a double bill, and in between there was an hour and a half. So we queued up for 45 minutes to get something to eat.
Oh, wow.
And then when we got to the end, they said, oh, we don't have any food left.
No. Oh, that is
so we complained, and they said, oh, it's because of the Olympics.
Right, yeah.
I thought, is that what's going on? I thought this was just my local restaurant. Oh, is that why there's all the people here?
Oh my goodness. Oh.
It's because of the Olympics. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's actually because of the FA Cup final. Is it? Sorry, I'm terribly sorry. I thought I was at the cinema. So we will move on to talking about this week's film then, which is Enough Said from 2013, I believe. So if you haven't seen it, then spoiler warnings going into this. Fergus, you picked this. So what is it about, and why did you pick it, apart from the fact that we asked you to come on and pick a film?
I picked it because I told my girlfriend that I was going to do this. And I said, they're looking for things that are overlooked. And she immediately knew that this would be top of my list. She said, well, you're going to do Enough Said, aren't you? And I thought, I don't know if I can talk about Enough Said. I don't know if I've got enough to say about it.
Funnily
but
enough.
I feel so strongly that it is the most overlooked film that I'm aware of. I think it might be the best film of all time.
Wow.
I mean that's obviously hyperbole, but for me, it's just, for me personally, I just think it is the perfect film. It stars James Gandolfini, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Toni Collette, and Catherine Keener, who are 4 of my top 10 actors. Every actor in that is phenomenal. It's not about much, really. Have you both seen it? Did you watch it?
Oh, yeah. We watched it, yeah.
Have you already watched it?
No.
Because it's overlooked. Because it's overlooked.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. You know, that's the whole thing. I hadn't even heard of it. Alice, had you heard of it?
No, hadn't heard of it.
Right. Okay. So I got that part of the assignment correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nailed that one.
The premise is so simple. It's just sort of gentle farce. It could be the plot of a 20-minute sitcom episode. Julia Louis-Dreyfus goes to a party. She's single. She meets James Gandolfini and she meets Catherine Keener separately. She becomes Catherine Keener's masseuse, and she starts dating James Gandolfini. The twist is that James Gandolfini and Catherine Keener are divorced. But at first, she doesn't know this. So Catherine Keener's slagging off her ex-husband, and James Gandolfini's slagging off his ex-wife. And she figures it out, I don't know, a third of the way through the movie, probably at the end of Act 1. She figures it out, and she doesn't tell anyone, so she allows that situation to continue. In other hands, it could be an awful film. There's really not much to it. It could be a really pedestrian romantic comedy. But, I mean, step in at any point you want, because I could just monologue in it for a long time.
Well, in that case, that's what we'll do then. Alice, so you said you hadn't heard this before, so
Mhm.
that's both of us. That's quite rare, actually, that neither of us have even heard of the film.
Mm.
So going into it, then, what did you think? Let's start with what you liked. What did you like about it?
So I did like quite a lot of the story and the premise. So it's basically these middle-aged people who are trying to navigate being middle-aged, I suppose, and what it's like to try and make friends when you're of a certain age or when you've had certain life experiences, and then what it's like to try and date someone when you are divorced and you have a kid, and then they are also divorced and have a kid, and the sort of complications that come with that. I thought there were some really charming elements of the dialogue. So so it's Eva and Albert, isn't it, our two protagonists? And when they're together and when they're sort of first dating and getting to know each other, there are so many moments where things could suddenly turn incredibly awkward or just be a bit like, oh God, why did he say that? Like, I think he mentions the big blister on her foot and he starts saying like, oh, I don't like feet. Feet are horrible. And she just sort of takes it on the chin and she's like, oh, so you don't like my feet? And they kind of make a joke about it. And a few things like this happen at the beginning. And you can just see that they're really making an effort to try and make this work. Obviously, they seem a bit world weary and a bit exhausted from, either being in the dating game or maybe not having dated for a while. And so they just really want this to work. And so you get quite this nice little relationship between them. You've got their couple friend, Tony Collette is the wife. I can't remember the name of the husband. Married
Ben
to
Falcone.
Melissa
Ben,
McCarthy.
in real life.
Everyone just knows him as Melissa McCarthy.
I know,
the guy who's the airplane marshal in Bright.
Oh, it's not just the funniest bit of that whole film. I love that. And they've got like this really weird sort of toxic marriage where they sort of just piling on these microaggressions at one another until this sort of bubbles up towards the end. And it's like you say, Fergus, it is just kind of about this. It's about these relationships. It's about how these people interact with each other. There's no sort of real clear purpose of it. And you're just sort of along with them as they try and navigate this part of their lives. So I did think there were some really charming elements to it. The script, I think, is the sort of the thing that's really holding it all together. It's very well written. It was quite funny in places. And some of the characters did come across as quite endearing. And it was quite not super realistic, but you could believe that these were conversations and these were situations that people were having. But overall, it's quite a fun, enjoyable experience, sort of like that easy Saturday night viewing, I would think. What about you, Josh? What were some of your initial thoughts when you came away from it?
I mean, I have to say, I loved it.
Did you? You love this sort of thing.
I do.
You love this sort of thing.
I do love this sort of thing. I do because, and I've said it before, and I'll no doubt say it again. And it sort of echoes Fergus's point earlier, which is, first of all, yes, in the wrong hands, this could have been a shitty rom-com, and it's not, because it feels more than that. It feels like it doesn't feel like it's trying to do something that a rom-com is trying to do. It's sort of feeling like it's just going, oh, this is what it is, take it or leave it. So I think, and again, this is the point that I always make, which is why Alice is saying I like this sort of film, which is I think there's a real place in the world for films like this, films that explore real life, real emotions. Not everything has to have huge end of the world stakes and spectacle and CGI. That very much has its place. Love the Marvel films and the DC films as much as anybody, but I think that over time, as cinemas and that sort of thing have become more and more desperate maybe to get people into the cinema, I think you're losing more and more of this sort of narrative to TV. TV gives you that time to develop those characters, and you could do this film over 10 episodes or 10 hours, whereas this does it in an hour and a half. And I think there's a real skill to that, and I think that's one of the real pleasures of this film, is that they explore people who feel like real people. And as well, I think you could probably say films like this are important to be made because they're definitely for different demographics. It's probably not what you might call your typical cinema going demographic, so to speak. I loved the cast, as you say, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I'd not really seen her in much before, other than the odd episode of Seinfeld, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and what's the
Veep.
American version of
She's
the thick
in
of it?
Veep, yeah.
Veep, that's it,
Yeah.
Veep. James Gandolfini, the late great James Gandolfini. It's one of the last films he did. Again, I'd not seen him in much other than The Sopranos and the film of the thick of it, In the Loop. So it's a bit of a weird link there. Toni Collette, Catherine Keener, they all do a really good job of bringing to life these sort of quite bits of naturalistic dialogue and that sort of thing. I think there's a really great chemistry between the leads as well. I like that it explores. It does a really good job. The script of because I agree with you, Alice. I think the script was the highlight for me, as well as the cast. But I just love bits of the script because I love that it explored perspective. You know, what really irritates one person is something that's really endearing to another person. Or, you know, you've got some really interesting things that it does with Julie Louis-Dreyfus's daughter and her friend. And her daughter's friend sort of doesn't have a relationship with her mum. They don't get on. They're always falling out. So she spends a lot of time at Julie Louis-Dreyfus's house, which then sort of leads to resentment from both her daughter and the mother of the friend and that sort of thing. I thought that was quite interesting. And again, those ideas of perspective and exploring compatibility, if you will, between people. You know, that idea of that you know sort of that that there's something going on because there's little hints about, well, my ex-wife and my ex-husband, and then like Fergus says towards the end of the first act, you know, whatever it is, halfway through, third of the way through, you get hit with the realization, and she knows for ages before they find out, which is then the final act is after they've found out. I think that's really interesting. It's a really subtle script in that sense. And then you also get another element, which is, you know, like you said, the petty friends that are arguing. One of the things they're arguing about is the treatment of their cleaner.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, she's rubbish or she's doing stuff I don't want to do. And then at the end, I think they sack her and then rehire her out of sort of, you know, fear, don't they, of like being seen as impolite or whatever. And then as they're at a party or dinner party, whatever it is, she tries to tell her to do something. The cleaner just goes, "Oh, do you know what? Like, don't need this shit." And it's like a real moment of, you know, this is someone who's cleaning your house and you're treating her like shit, sort of thing. And again, it's that exploration of perspective, which I really enjoyed. I found it really, you know, the runtime just flew by. I loved all the characters. You know, it was great. Really, really enjoyed it. So, Fergus, what specifically would you like about the film, or is it just everything you've said already?
Well, no, I've got so much I could say. I mean, my heart skipped a beat before you started there, just because I was like, what if he doesn't like it?
I knew he was gonna love this one.
I knew I'd like this from the poster. I was like, this is gonna be, this is a bit of me. This.
I felt like you, Alice, you were all right on it. But I was like, if Joss really lays into it, I was like, I'm not sure I can take this on a Thursday night. Because I rewatched it a couple of days ago and I was like crying at the end. I love it so much. I think Julia Louis-Dreyfus might be just. I think it's an Oscar-winning performance. It's not like it's just. It would never, ever, ever get close to winning an Oscar because there's no fireworks. There's nothing spectacular about this film. It just does something that's really important, really well. It just represents people, and that was a really good point about how this sort of stuff has been co-opted by TV now. You don't get these sort of films very often anymore. 1.5 hours. Please, can we have more films that are 1.5 hours?
It's the dream, isn't it? It's the dream.
Yeah. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she does something, she's so natural and charming and funny. I've never been a huge Seinfeld fan, so I've seen her in that, always thought she's brilliant. I've watched a lot of Veep and I love her in that. I think she's just an amazing comic actress. But I don't think I've ever seen an actress her age in a romantic comedy who's clearly like attractive, but there's like zero vanity to it. There's zero like work. She's very happy to just be ugly. Do you know what I mean?
No, but I know what you mean. There's no like her. There's no glow up scene. There's no her. You know, quite often films like this that deal with people, you know, who are a bit older getting in relationships, they cannot help but reference it.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't reference it. It just sort of goes, look, there it is. Happens, doesn't it?
What I mean by be ugly is I don't want to like. It's just what I mean. What I mean is she will pull. I can only sort of do this visually, but she will pull the face in the moment that is the right face.
Yeah.
To pull. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very natural.
It's funny. It's the correct emotion. I'm in awe of it.
Mm.
but it's not the most attractive face. Do you know what I mean? You know that on set, the questions she was asking were not about the lighting and what side was she being shot by from. Do you know what I mean?
That's a really good point, actually. That's a really good point.
But
And
definitely her facial expressions are that, like, they're up there with Jim Carrey's. Like,
Right.
it's like top tier facial expressions.
Yeah.
And James Gandolfini is obviously one of my favorite actors as well. And obviously, if you mainly know from The Sopranos, which is pretty much all of us, it's a very different performance and very different character. But he's also just got that sort of truth to him. You just completely believe him.
He's so likable, isn't he? He's so charming. Because he's even likable as Tony Soprano. Like, not to go off on a tangent, but he does some despicable things, and he's still like, go on, Tony. I like a bit of Tony. He's just a guy trying to help
these are
himself out.
These are the sort of performances that are never going to win Oscars. I love Daniel Day-Lewis and Christian Bale or whoever, you know, Al Pacino, all these like firework performances that get loads of credit. But just being able to just naturally play a human who you like.
Yeah. It's a difficult. I remember having this conversation with someone around the time when Joaquin Phoenix won his Oscar for Joker. Now, I love Joker. I think he gives a spectacular performance in that. He probably is deserving of an Oscar. But I remember saying, I think Adam Driver should have won it for Marriage Story. And they were like, could not understand why. And I said, because he is, you know, Joaquin Phoenix is playing the Joker and he does a great job, but it's a very cartoony, it's a very big performance. And like you say, with these performances, you get this mythos, they lost so much weight. Oh, they went and lived in a cave for a year. Oh, he bit his own tongue off. Like, do you know what I mean? It's all this sort of thing. And that's great. And I like reading about that, same as you, Fergus. But Adam Driver does, you know, he plays a man whose life and his marriage is falling apart. And he does it really well. And that is, in a way, harder than playing the Joker. Both equally deserving, but I remember thinking I preferred Adam Driver's performance. Do you know what I mean?
I think they're both worthy of credit, but one gets credit and the other doesn't. You know, like those sort of films, those sort of performances, they don't tend to win awards. And
like you say, it's that whole thing, is it? Well, you've put loads of weight on. Well, you've lost loads of weight, so it's a shoe-in.
Yeah,
you know, it's the same old story. So, I mean, what did you think of like the scripts and stuff? Like, is that a highlight for you as well, or is it?
I mean, it's obviously the same. Everything about it it's something very simple done incredibly well.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd love to drill down on that script because on the one hand, it feels so simple, but I just don't think I could ever do that. It's just so deftly done. And, you know, if that had a few, I'm assuming, I can't pronounce her surname, the lady who wrote and directed it, but I'm assuming that she was given a lot of power of it, because I think Hollywood ruins a lot of these movies because they go through so many drafts and have different writers. But I'd like to assume that she was sort of like given a lot of power over what she was doing. So it maintains its sort of identity. It could have easily turned into, it could have been a rom-com with Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah.
It could have been that.
Yeah, no, it could.
But it's just very gently done. And they're complex characters, right? They do good things and bad things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was thinking about when I rewatched it, that couple, Toni Collette and Melissa McCarthy's husband.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah.
His full name.
I you know, a lot of people watching that might not like them. They are like rude to like essentially their servant, you know. And but they're real people, right? People are complex, and it's not a story about class or anything. It's just a story written from a perspective about a situation. So I could see how that would be the only thing that I could see might rub some other people up the wrong way. But I'm a big fan of complex characters and characters being not good or bad, just people.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There is no bad guy or good guy. You know, it's not good versus evil. It's you know, I've said this before, and again, Alice is going to laugh because I've said the phrase before, but it's a slice of life film. It sounds so wanky, I know.
But
But that's how I think. That's how I think of it. So we'll move on to talking about things that we might change about the film or that we perhaps didn't like. Alice, was there much for you?
So we've already sort of alluded to it, but obviously the characters, they're not. So I didn't find the characters very likable, but obviously they're not there to be likable. They're there to be real. So, we're seeing their good parts and we're seeing their flaws as well. But I did find that because I didn't find any of them likable, I wasn't super invested in the story. So it was kind of like if the electricity had gone off halfway through, like I wouldn't have minded, like I wasn't sort of on the edge of my seat waiting to see how this all kind of got resolved. There was just a few things like with Eva's character, like after she meets Albert's daughter for the first time and she says that she's horrible just because that, she knew her own mind and she wanted to go to a different restaurant and stuff. And his daughter also says like, oh yeah, I don't want kids. And Eva and Albert are like horrified and they're like, oh, don't worry, she doesn't know what she's saying and all this. And it's like, well, to be fair, she is from a broken home in a household where her mum and dad were so unbelievably toxic to her. Like, do we not think that that's maybe spilled over and probably influenced her decision to not want to have children? And just there's obviously the very sort of farcical element, like you said, Fergus, and it is a farce. Like you could see this on the stage, definitely. But the way that she sort of hides the fact that she knows that Albert and is it Marianne, who is his ex-wife? The lady she's massaging?
I think so.
I can't remember the name of it.
Dear.
Just Catherine Keener. Catherine.
Yeah. So Catherine.
The poet.
Yes, the poet. So yeah, that just kind of felt a bit like, obviously you're just a little bit like, why don't you just let them know? Like, you're all adults here. Like, why don't you all just get in a room and have a conversation with each other? And that all kind of irritated me. But obviously it's meant to. Like, it's meant to be the fact that, just because I'm, in my 40s or into my 50s doesn't mean I always make the right decisions, doesn't mean I can always act in a way that I would like to, as a mature adult. And you still have these fears and you still have these insecurities. She obviously just wants to please everybody because she likes being friends with Catherine, the masseuse, and she likes being friends with or being in a romantic relationship with Albert. So I do get all that, and I get that all that is the purpose. But for me, it just wasn't engaging enough. I didn't really care that much kind of about what happened to them and if this relationship worked out or anything. I do think it was written very well, but I think it just wasn't for me, basically. I know it was for you, Josh. And it's good that you're here. And it was clearly
Keanu Reeves wasn't in it, so...
I mean, if KR right there, I'm not interested.
No, but at the end of the day, everything's subjective, isn't it? So, if that's what you're saying, then that's what you're saying. Do you think perhaps the farcical elements took you out of it and sort of damaged just your suspension of disbelief sort of thing? Would you say that was fair, or is it just a case of you just couldn't get on board with the characters?
I think if I'd had some kind of prior knowledge and some expectation that was accurate, it might have been a bit different, because it does... I feel like the way you experience a film is influenced by what you're expecting. And I think perhaps I was expecting one thing and it was another. And so when these sort of farcical and very theatrical elements of it started happening, I was just a bit like, oh, like I'm not really on board with that, not really on board with that. But if I'd gone into it thinking that this is what it's going to be, then it might have been a different story. But I think go on, sorry, Fergus.
I was just going to say it's inherently a difficult situation, isn't it? Because this is a podcast where I've selected a film that I am saying is the most overlooked film of all time. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'm a person who went into a cinema and watched it not knowing anything about it and thinking there's a couple of actors I like in this. And I was like, I really enjoyed that film. And then I'm a person who, if I like a film, I'll rewatch it. But I think it's a very nice film to spend time with. It's a perfectly rewatchable film. So I've rewatched it a few times and loved it more each time. So it's become something that I have a very personal relationship with. Whereas if you come into something with expectations that, it's completely different. Yeah. Mm. But when you talk about likable characters, that would be a big pet peeve of mine. But it's each to their own, isn't it? I'm all for unlikable people in films. I love my favorite characters are always the least supposedly likable. I actually don't. I think the two main characters, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini, they're like incredibly likable people. I'd love to be friends with both of them. I think they're lovely. And that daughter, she was right. She was horrible. That was a whole joke. Maybe it's because I'm older. Maybe because I'm closer to their age. That daughter was abhorrent.
That's Bono's daughter, isn't it?
Was it?
That actress is Bono's daughter.
Did not know.
Eve Hewson.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I mean, for you, Fergus, is there? I'm guessing not. Is there anything you particularly you would change about it, apart from presumably making it longer and
at least 8 sequels?
Yeah.
My whole thing about this film is it is not. There are lots of films that have a lot of plaudits that I could make an argument are like maybe my favorite film of all time, or maybe better, or whatever. But this one, to my mind, for me personally, I don't think there is a single thing wrong with it. I think it is absolute perfection of what it is. That is my opinion.
No, but we've had this conversation.
That's
we've had this
what we're here
conversation
for.
multiple times, haven't we? Only recently one of our other previous guests picked About Time, and I loved About Time when I first watched it, and my other half hated it.
Is that the Richard Curtis one?
The Richard Curtis one with Rachel McAdams and Dermot.
That's one I've never watched, just because I've assumed I would hate it.
Yeah, I hated it. I wasn't into it
Alice didn't like it. My partner didn't like it. She hates it to the point where it became a running joke when you go to put a film, and I'll always go About Time because it winds her up so much. Yeah. She hates it. She just says it's posh people having a lovely time, and she can't get on board with that.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, quite enjoy woolly jumpers and posh people having a lovely time, that sort of thing. So, but it's subjectivity, and like you say, it is a little bit paradoxical when people come on this podcast because that's just the very nature of it. All films are subjective. I've seen films that have hailed as the great, some of the greats, and no, not thought they'd be that good. Absolutely love Citizen Kane. Don't think Casablanca's very good. It's that sort of thing.
And you don't like Grease too, which just
and I don't like Grease
my
too,
mind.
which is right, which is the correct opinion. My opinion on that film is correct.
What about you with this then, Josh? Like, was there anything that you would change or that you didn't like?
Nothing like huge. I think that there's two things I would have, and this is like I would have liked to have seen it. The first is a bit more development of the daughter, as in Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character's daughter, and I just would have liked to have seen more of her. And the second one, and the main one is, and again, this is just I would have liked it, was at the end you get a lovely little resolution between Albert and Eva, and I would have perhaps liked some resolution between Catherine Keener's character and Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, because they were friends independently of that. So I think maybe it would have been nice to see, two women becoming friends separately to her going out with her ex-husband, and but maybe that's me being a bit woolly again and being like, well, everything could just be lovely,
You just made me think of another thing I completely love about the film.
Go on, say it.
Is it the opposite of what I've just said?
You've invited me. No, you've invited me on the podcast to talk about a film that I love. You can't say, "Oh, for God's sake," when I say something I love about it. Catherine Keener's character, it definitely lays it on a plate what you're supposed to think about her. Do you know what I mean? She's a sort of airy. I perceive her as like being a sort of like airy fairy sort of poet.
Yeah,
who says blessings and stuff. And it's quite it's funny because Catherine Keener is so funny, but it's so subtle. You can take what you want from it. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't lay it on a plate for you. Like, this is the comedy poet artist character.
Yeah.
It's just sort of there. She still exists in the plot and functions, and you don't root for her or against her. She's just, So.
No, and like you said, if this was like an episode of a sitcom, you can imagine that character would float in a flowery dress and a daisy chain round her head. Whereas in this, they get the balance right between, she is a bit airy-fairy and a bit, it's that mixture between airy-fairiness, pretentiousness, and, she feels like a real person, I guess is what I'm trying to say, rather than, I did elements of creative writing at university. I've met people who are way more airy-fairy than her character in this, who were real people. So, I think they get the balance absolutely spot on.
Definitely, because I didn't find her pretentious at all, really. And like, she gives Eva her book, doesn't she? Her poetry book. And he was like, oh, I won't be able to understand it. And she's like, yeah, of course you will. Or she's just like, she's super casual about it. She's not trying to lecture her about it or be like, oh, but this is what this means. And it's me speaking from my soul or whatever. Like, she's just like, yeah, is the book, take it or leave it. And I'll just very casually phone my friend Joni Mitchell. Like, it's all just very casual. She's not rubbing it in your face, is she? She's just like, here I am, take it or leave it.
So we'll move on to talking about the critical reception then. Alice, presuming you haven't seen the critical reception, how do you think it did?
I reckon it probably did quite well. I think with a cast like that, I think that is going to draw a lot of people in. And I think it would have been quite a lot of people's cup of tea, really. So I think you're probably looking at least a low 7. So if I was going to guess, I'd probably say maybe like a 7.3 or 73 Rotten Tomatoes wise.
And what would you give it?
What would I give it?
Or is that what you would give it?
No, I'd give it more like an early 6 probably, or like a 6.1 or a 6.2. Yeah.
Okay. Fergus, what about you? How do you think it did? Obviously, we know you love it, but how do you think it did?
I actually did look it up on Rotten Tomatoes today, so I know the answer to this. I was surprised. I won't reveal it. On Josh.
So, well, I'll reveal it. On IMDb at time of recording, it gets 7 out of 10. On Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 75%, so not too dissimilar from the IMDb score, but the critics give it 95%.
Wow, holy moly.
That is one of the highest we ever had. We got 100 once, didn't we?
Well, Meet Me in St. Louis. It's a bit different when it's a classic one. But I tell you as well, though, and what this did remind me of a little bit, 50-50 got similar to this.
It did,
50-50 got about 90% as well.
Yeah.
Wow, 95. Crikey.
So what do you think, Fergus? Is that fair? I mean, presumably you're siding with the 95% score.
Look, I mean, so I think it's the best film of all time, so I think it should be 100%. I've said it, I think it's absolute perfection. So, I want to know where that other 5% is.
And Alice, what would you say then?
So the kind of the audience score, the IMDb score, that's probably around sort of accurate for me.
Yeah. Okay.
But what about you? Like, are you sort of with Fergus on this?
Yeah, to be honest. Maybe I don't think I loved it as much as Fergus, but I would definitely watch it again, and I did really enjoy it. So I would say that the audience are underrating it there, and that the critics are over to appropriately rating it, shall we say. But Fergus, you picked this because you think it's overlooked and underseen. So I've got the box office pick here, and according to this, it made, if this is right, it made just over $25 million worldwide. So that's not loads. So
do you know what the budget was?
I don't know what the budget was, but I imagine that's probably quite a poor showing against the budget if you consider
who's
the cast.
In it.
Yeah. So I don't know the budget, but 25 million. A film like this with these people in it, 25 million quid's not going to get you that far.
I'm pretty sure that's less than the number 23 made as well. Yeah, there's your benchmark, and that got 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. So
that got 8%.
8%. Interesting.
So what do we think? What do we think then? For me, I would say that it is underseen.
I would definitely think it's underseen. Like, I hadn't seen it, I hadn't heard of it. Same with you, Josh. It's not something that's ever been on my radar or I've ever heard anyone mention. And with a box office like that, I would say it's definitely underseen.
Yeah, great. So there we go. Fergus, you think it's underseen? We reckon it is underseen. So there we go. We'll put it on in with the other underseen.
You won
films.
the podcast.
I won. Yes.
Well, Fergus, thank you very much for coming on. So where can our listeners look out for your stuff? What have you got going on?
Well, man, I've got a book that's out. So that's the big thing. I was on, over the last year or so, I've been doing this character on Twitter, this sort of middle-class dad who I decided to call Martin Fishback. I got the name Fishback from Judge Judy. There were two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there were some people on, I was going to call them contestants.
Well, a little bit.
There were some people on Judge Judy, the family name was Fishback. I thought, that's a good name, I'll take that. But I was doing this character, this sort of middle-class dad, and then I decided he was a crime novelist. So then I started doing videos on Twitter of just extracts from an imaginary crime novel, and that sort of took off, and then I got a book deal, and then I wrote the whole book. So I've written a whole novel based around this character, Detective Roger Le Carre. The book is called Once Upon a Crime.
Oh,
He's a character never seen before in modern fiction. You know, he's a tough but troubled detective with a drink problem.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is...
That's unique. This is gold.
The one to get is the audiobook. That's the thing. Is to get the audiobook. You know,
do you read the audiobook? Yeah.
I do it as myself. I do. Well, no, I do. If you're listening to this and thinking about getting involved, watch the Twitter video. The voice that I do in the videos is what I do in the audiobook. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
So did you land the book deal because of this character, because of the videos you were putting on Twitter?
Yeah. Someone got in touch and said they wanted. It was actually, do you know the writer Mark Billingham?
Oh yeah, that rings a bell.
He got in touch with his publisher, and they liked it, and then
that's very cool.
Then I wrote the whole book, and now the audiobook is it's ahead of actual John Le Carre in the charts at the moment.
I just saw that the other day. That's crazy. That's great. I mean, but well done. Congratulations. That's brilliant. That's really good. I was thinking this actually, and I was weighing up whether to ask you or not. What would Dad or Martin Fishback pick if he was coming on this podcast? Because I imagine he'd be very much like a Bridge over the River Kwai.
It's quite a good show.
Apocalypse
Where
Now.
Eagles Dare, The Great Escape, Dad films.
Yeah. Oh,
Magnificent Seven.
What would he pick? That's such a good question. I think he'd either he'd maybe try and show you his intelligence, you know? So actually, Seven Samurai, Kurosawa. Probably Japanese. He'd probably try and show you intelligence.
Well, so the book available just wherever you get books, you know, the usual job.
Yeah. It's a great Christmas present. But make sure it's a book of jokes, basically.
Yeah.
Don't read it expecting a crime novel that's a little bit funny, which is what some people are doing. It is a joke book.
How many people will buy it and think it is that?
I know. That worries me. But its only goal is to make you laugh. And the story is incidental.
We could all do with that about
absolutely.
now.
And I must say, Fergus, you know, I've been watching your videos all through lockdown. They're absolutely brilliant. I would urge everyone listening to this, you know, check it out. Check Fergus out on Twitter. Is it just at Fergus Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, buy the book and go and watch Enough Said as well and see what you think and get in touch. But yeah, Fergus, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Alice.
So there we go, another excellent guest episode in the bag. Please do go and check out Fergus's stuff at Fergus Craig on Twitter. He's on Instagram. Go and check out the book Once Upon a Crime. As he says, it's a really great Christmas present, you know, a joke crime book. Who wouldn't like that? Alice, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
I'd flipping love it. I want to go away and read it right now. I can't even wait till Christmas.
Exactly. So go and get your copy. Check him out on Twitter. Give him all the support he deserves because he's been brilliant during lockdown. He's kept me going with some of his videos. So yeah, check him out. So in the meantime, we will have another episode for you next week, but we don't know what it is yet, but we definitely will. And I can tell you now, Alice, it will be a film.
Oh, interesting. I am so intrigued.
In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're on TikTok. Just search for Just Films and That or Just Films and That Pod, and you will find us wherever you can see our logo. Until next time, Alice Oliver, thank you very much for joining me.
It's been a pleasure as always, Josh, and thank you.
And it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.